between David's getting involved and my getting involved, being much younger than David. I was a young lawyer in the late 70s, a graduate of Georgetown University Law Center, and did not take the traditional route. I wanted to come back and use law to reform the world. And I soon ran into David and became representing him. At the time, that was during what's called the operating license hearing. In that I got involved, I think, late 78 or 79. I think 78. At that point, Zimmer, or I'll say CG&E, although it's three companies, got their license to build the plant. They're going ahead with the operating license. And to describe the scene, I think first, everybody that was pro-nuclear, and maybe the general public, had the position that nothing could go wrong with a nuclear power plant. Certainly nothing. Therefore, they're safer. They would use the argument they're safer than coal because coal has all various deaths, which is true. And we have so many redundant systems in the plant that nothing can go wrong. And that's really was the mindset. CG&E comes in and they hire a company called Sargent and Lundy, which is still around today as the prime contractor. Now, Sargent and Lundy never built a nuclear power plant before that. I don't know if they have since, but that was a bad decision to start with. Their game plan, and I'm giving the hearing background, which is my lane, and I'll try to stay in that. I remember some of it. What I don't remember, I'll just make up, so correct me as I go along. CG&E they hired a Washington insider attorney named Troy Connor to handle the hearing. Troy Connor, at the time I thought he was old as dirt, but he was only in his mid-50s at the time. His background, he had been a government lawyer in the Atomic Energy Commission and I think the NRC. Helped write a lot of the regulations that now he was operating under. And along with him, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission would have their own attorney, an individual named Charles Barth, who was pretty much a cheerleader for the nuclear industry in the hearings. If you were to Google government bureaucratic attorneys, I think Mr. Barth's picture would show up there. He was certainly fit the bill. And their game plan usually was just to overwhelm interveners. Interveners didn't have the resources generally to hire experts, didn't understand the regulations as Mr. Barth did, and I used to say that it looked like he would go to bed at night memorizing the regulations, and that was his life. Except, and this is one sidelight, somewhere along the line he was accused of having an affair with one of the ZAC members. Now, I don't know whether it was true, but okay.
No.
Andy Dennison, who I will discuss in some detail in a moment or two, and represented ZAC in the hearing. I remember him commenting that it was the first time he ever saw a well-known domestic relations lawyer come into an NRC hearing, which, but we won't go there. Anyway, as time went on, in 1979, the actual licensing hearing was scheduled in May. 79 was not a good year for CG&E. March was 3 Mile Island. David, through me and the Miami Valley Power Project, which was an intervener by then, motion to have the hearing continued. And it was, I think also the NRC had to go back and relook assumptions. And then things got worse. As David described some of the worker problems and quality control problems, and part of them, I think, my assumption would be that CG&E, which was old Cincinnati, would make sure that their favorite vendors or contractors were hired, and nobody really cared about the quality of material, hence the belt buckles and on and on. Anyway, CG&E got the idea that, well, we do have workers out of control. We'll hire an investigator, a young man named Applegate, to investigate what they thought was worker theft. And I guess we've got proof of that. Anyway,
And time cards.
And time cards. And CG&E, unfortunately, Mr. Applegate found a lot worse than theft. He saw construction cover-up, tremendous deficiencies in quality assurance. And keep in mind, quality assurance workers from NRC would come to the site and they would literally be harassed by the workers. And that was a matter of well documented. Anyway, we get into 1980, and by then Zach, both in Northern Kentucky and Cincinnati, become interveners. And I'll describe, and this is where I'll stay in my lane, representing David and also Zach, who had a tremendously skilled volunteer workers. Didn't have the resources to hire experts to challenge the construction itself. What Andy did, and I'll give a little background, Andy was a local trial attorney, probably one of the best criminal defense attorneys in Cincinnati, bar none, and I witnessed that many times. Andy, representing Zach, was able to take on Troy Connor and Charles Barth, and they were no match for him. He was no match for them. I reverse that. Andy turned this around, and we attacked the safety plan, the emergency evacuation safety plan. And while I try not to be a hoarder, that was the one thing I kept, and it's over on the table, the 13th and final edition of their safety plan. And what Andy knew is he knew Southern Claremont County. He knew law enforcement people and volunteers and whatever. And this, to a large extent, did not become a hearing about, well, is this construction process correct or whatever. But Andy, with his analytical skills and his cross-examination skills, could take apart the safety plan. The safety plan, and I learned this later, years later I ran into a Sergeant Lundy engineer who he said he was the young guy on the totem pole, so they gave him the job of writing the safety plan, because that's not really engineering. So, okay, just quick illustration of what he did. The safety plan for the schools, and many of you know we're New Richmond High School, and there was a middle school and elementary school. It's on one major road, access to and from. And the plan was if there was an emergency, they shelter in place, they close the windows and the doors, and they turn off the heating or air conditioning system, and everybody's safe. It looks good on paper. The plan went on to say, well, if there's evacuation, well, we get the buses and we bus them out of the area. It looks good on paper. Of course, the problem is the buses aren't even on site at the school. So you have to get the buses. The bus drivers are part-time. You have to find the bus drivers, hope that they're not worried about their own family and are going to drive to the school, and then pick up all the kids, and then you got to determine which way the wind is blowing, because that's going to affect which way you run the buses. And finally, and this is most critical, you've got about 1,000 students at the school, and you've got to hope that their parents follow the rules and don't come to the school and just evacuate themselves. So it would have been a prescription for disaster. And that was the type of thing that Andy took on, and one of many examples. The end result was, at the end of the hearing, and I did hear this, one of the three hearing judges went up to Andy and complimented him and told him that he had raised the standard of practice before the NRC with his work. It was truly incredible. And as a result, it was the only plant ever to have an operating license denied. And that went on until the appeals, and at that point when CG&E decided, well, we were outflanked and things were getting worse, they said, well, never mind, we were really only kidding. It's a coal plant. And that was the end of it. But the hearing was an amazing story, and really a tribute in my mind to Andy and what he did. So next.